Hey everybody, Lon here at from Gearhead Garage. We are out at Chris Anderson's place today. We're going to take a look inside of his little shop here, and it's just not a little one here. You can see it here in a minute. He's got some really different kind of vehicles in there. We're going to talk to him about where they are from and a little bit of history behind it. We're going to go from his Camaro that's multiple horsepower. I'm not sure what it actually is, probably 650 maybe, somewhere in that range. It's got the Corvette motor in it, down to a 1 horsepower option that he's got on his farm here. So let's take a look inside and see what's going on. So here is Chris's, actually we get up to the window here, you can kind of see what it is. Chris's speed shop, built for speed, along with some old memorabilia inside there. Sorry for the reflection, everything is kind of late in the day, so we'll get inside, take a look around, see what's happening, and you also got some artwork here. Take a look and see what's going on, so stay tuned. Hey guys, I am down with Chris Anderson this afternoon at his horsepower farm, I'm calling it. We're going to see horsepower, everything from a 850 horsepower Camaro, I don't know if it's that many horsepower now, but that's what I'm calling it anyway, to a 1 horsepower vehicle. Well, I don't know if, let's not call it a vehicle, but he's got a 1 horsepower object, we'll call it, that we're going to talk about later on, and many things in between. So as I usually do, I'm going to start off and ask Chris, how did you get started in this crazy business of high performance or vehicles or working with your hands, so let's call it that?
Well, I grew up in South Minneapolis, city kid. You know, we rode around the lakes. I grew up down by Lake Nokomis, and probably 10 years old or so, I got my first Stingray bicycle, which is behind us. We can talk a little more about that.
That looks like a modified Stingray bicycle.
Yeah, and that was my first bike, and I had to start tinkering with it, you know, pretty much right away. And so I guess that's kind of where, you know, we started learning how to fix things and take things apart. And, you know, I had a paper route, I mowed lawns. I had my first motorcycle that a neighbor had buried in a garage when I was probably about 14. It was like a late 60s, early 70s Benelli, like a 90. And it hadn't run for years, and he said if I wanted it, I could have it.
Oh, cool.
So I drug it home, and my dad helped me, and we cleaned out the gas tank and took the carb off and took it apart and cleaned it and put it all back together, and we got it running. And, you know, kind of rode it around the neighborhood a little bit, and that got sold, but that kind of fueled my, I've had motorcycles my whole life too, and still do. So that was part of it. My dad also purchased a 1941 Ford when I was probably 12, 13 years old. And when I was 60, he said he would give me the car if we restored it. And I wanted to turn it into a hot rod, and he wanted to restore it. But anyway, we did work on the car, did make some progress on it. But by the time I got to high school, had other things, too many things going, sure. and that car never did get completed. But worked in a gas station, high school and after high school, and that's where I learned how to do a lot of, you know, different things back in the day. We learned, you know, how to do tune-ups and, you know, brakes sure. and tires and suspension and shocks, and ran a tow truck and started cars in the wintertime and did everything there was to do for about, you know, 6 years. And then finally got my first full-time job and got married and, you know, moved on with life. But, you know, having, you know, cars and motorcycles has just been a passion since I was a young kid.
Yeah. Kind of the same path the other gearheads that I've talked to, it's kind of that same thing. It started very young in life, and I think one of my other videos I said there must have been something in the water or something that we were drinking, because everybody almost has the same story. It's starting off with something small, such as your cool little bike here. I did the same thing. The first thing I did when I got a new bike was take it apart. I mean, it was, and my parents come on and said, "What are you doing, taking this brand new bike apart?" And I was, "Oh, that's what we did." And then it just kind of progressed from there. So everybody's kind of has that same story, and it's kind of cool to hear everybody's path, even though it's different, it's the same, which is
Yeah.
And other people had influences in your life too. There's an uncle or a grandpa, or my dad was never really inspired for me to take things apart, but
Right.
he kind of supported me, I guess.
Yep. Well, back when I was in high school, you know, the old muscle cars were still prevalent and running around and affordable. And back then, I never had a fast car, but I had friends that did, and I helped them work on them and fix them, and you know, always wanted one. And so, as you know, life went on, I've been able to acquire a few older and newer cars, and have enjoyed, you know, the hobby my whole life. So
Good, cool, yeah. And we'll get around to look at some of Chris's toys here in this garage. It's a super nice garage that Chris has got on his property here. And he'll have, I'm sure, a story to tell on all of the different vehicles that he's accumulated over the last couple of years here, and where they came from, and how they got into his family. So I'm kind of looking forward to that. So stay tuned. Hey Chris, we talked about your first Stingray bike that you modified. Tell us about it.
first thing we did was it had a regular fork on it, and it had the short, you know, little sissy bar that came up to here. So I think the first thing I bought was the tall sissy bar. It was, you know, kind of the Captain America, you know, Peter Fonda thing. And well, then the next thing I did is I went to a little local bike shop in Minneapolis, and out of a catalog I ordered the extended straight fork. You know, choppers in the 70s were in, and so us young kids, you know, had those influences. So, but that's basically, I repainted the frame and dolled it up a little bit, but it was the original bike that I had, my first little Stingray bike when I was, you know, 10 years old and started.
Hey Chris, let's take a look at some of your other vehicles here. Look like you've got some early Chevys, kind of a hot rod here. Camaro, looks like that's your new Camaro. That's that big 850 horsepower Camaro. But first, let's take a look at that. It looks like an early 60s Corvette.
You know, I alluded to 10 years old. We started working on bicycles. Well, by the time I got to high school age, got a job working in a gas station. Met a good friend of mine that we're still friends to this day back in the late 70s. Long story short, he had a Cuda that we raced around South Minneapolis for a number of years. And when he got tired of that, in about the mid-'80s, he was looking for an old solid axle Corvette. We went and looked at this car up in Maplewood, and he passed on the car. It was ordered without a convertible top and with a factory removable hard top. And the paint, as you can tell, it's all original. It's never been repainted. So it didn't have a convertible top, and it wasn't shiny, so he passed on the car. The following Monday, my dad was kind of getting into cars, and I had worked for him at the time, and I told him about the car, and he wanted to go look at it. So consequently, the next weekend, we drove back up to Maplewood and looked at the car, and my dad bought it. And I think that was in like 1985 or 1986, somewhere in that, probably 1986. We kept it running and drove it for a few years. He had bought some other cars over the subsequent, you know, decade or two, and so the car ended up getting kind of parked and buried, and basically hasn't run since probably, you know, 1989, 1990. He passed away, and so this is one of his cars that I kept because I had history with it, with him, you know, and that friend of mine that originally looked at it. So the car is all original, has numbers matching 283, 270 horse small block with a 4-speed. And hopefully one day if I retire, I would like to restore the car.
Well, 1961 Corvette. You just don't see a lot of those things around anymore in that kind of condition, so it's kind of cool to see that. But right underneath that sits Chris's Chevelle. I think this is an early 70s model. Giving Chris a minute here to put the air cleaner on it so we get the really good view of that motor. Once he gets that on there, we'll pop over and ask Chris to see where this vehicle came from. Looks like it was part of his family also, so let's hear what Chris has to say about it.
This was a car that my dad had also purchased. He bought it from the original owner in about 1988, 89. The gentleman lived in Wilmer, Minnesota. My dad was the second owner. It had like 89,000 original miles on it. Again, kept it running, drove it for a couple, 2-3 years, and then it kind of got parked and wasn't used much, and so it sat for quite a number of years. I got the car from him in about 2005 and kind of set about rebuilding and freshening it up, and I've pretty much done everything on the car over about a 5-year period of time. And I was always a sucker for the Chevelles. I've owned a couple older Chevelles, but I always wanted this body style with the cowl induction hood that, you know, opens up when you stick your foot in the gas pedal, and was just kind of a gimmicky little feature that the automakers did on various, you know, manufacturers and cars over the years to get some cold air and gain another 5 horsepower or whatever it was. But it's kind of cool. But I've always liked this style Chevelle and always wanted one, and now I have one. Yeah, it's the original green. I changed the stripes. They were originally black, and I thought white looked better, so we, you know, changed the white, put the white stripes on it. A friend of mine and I repainted the car in, I think, 2006, and then in 2007-8, I did the whole chassis and had the motor rebuilt and, you know, a bunch of other stuff. So the car's been done for quite a while. And the paint was nice enough to just drive it, and I wanted to be able to drive the car and use it. It is an original LS5, 454 4-speed. It has the Muncie Rock Crusher M22 4-speed in it. We have the Protecto plate, the original invoice, the build sheet that was on top of the old gas tank. Pretty much have all of his records that the previous owner owned it. So the car has a lot of documentation.
Moving on to Chris's hot rod here, looks like it's in the mid-40s, probably not mid-40s, but early 40s. Chris, what is it?
1946. So basically, yeah, basically the same body style as 1941. They built some 42s before production, you know, shut down for World War II. After World War II, 1946, they started producing cars again, dug out the old tooling from, you know, 41, 42, and started building cars. And they ran this body style through 1948.
And Chris, what motor you got in the car?
It's a late 70s 350 Oldsmobile. And turbo 350, it has Mustang 2 front suspension, Granada rear end, powered disc brakes, heat, air. So it's been updated to drive. Nice driving car. It's not real fast, but yeah, and the body's all stock on it. And this car was purchased rough out of South Dakota in about 1999, and I think we got it on the road in 2003. And the gentleman I helped build the car for enjoyed it for about 4 years or so, and my daughter used to ride in parades and throw candy out the window, and He passed away in 2008, and so then I purchased the car from his wife and thought we should probably keep this in the family. And I've changed a few things, wheels, tires, added pinstriping, sorted the car a little bit here and there, and so that's how the car has come to me. And we enjoy the car, do some of the local cruises and Minnetonka Drive-In and Henderson, some of the cruises around town. So
I'm moving on to the next vehicle. He looks like Chris is a Camaro here that he's got in the garage here. I think this is the 650 horsepower, 850, lots of horsepower in this car. Chris has had it on the track a few times. I know it's his daily driver. It's one of those things that I think he enjoys driving as much as looking at it.
well, yeah, actually it's kind of my wife's car. We started out with a 2010 Camaro V6 six-speed manual coupe. In 2010, that was her car, and we enjoyed that for a couple of years. And in 2012, she fell in love with a black Camaro SS 45th anniversary convertible. So the little six-cylinder, six-speed went away, and we acquired a convertible 45th anniversary. And we had that for about 4 years or so. And in 16, when the kind of this new body style, new platform came out from GM, I read some of the particulars and kind of was following the Camaros at the point and really liked what they had done with the car. I liked the body changes. It was came with the new updated Corvette motor, six-speed manual transmission, great suspension, wheel tire package, and I talked her into letting the 45th go and picking this one up. And I have not regretted it a day since. I just love this car. It really does everything really well, and for not a real expensive car, it's just a blast to drive. It inspires confidence. It's an easy car to drive at a fairly quick pace, and it just doesn't have really any gremlins, and I just really enjoy it. It's been a really fun car over the last 5 years, and had a lot of track days with it and given lots of people rides in it, and everybody gets out with a smile on their face, including me. So what more can you ask from a vehicle?
Chris, looks like we're going from something American made to the British flavor here.
This is a car that I don't own. It's my brother's car, but we ran across this car a couple years ago, and we both had kind of liked, I'd never had a British car. I always liked either the MG or the Triumph TR6s, and so he knew the guy that had it, and we went and looked at it. He asked me to come and look at it with him, and so we went and looked at it, and it was just a cute little car. And so I kind of threw it out there to him. I said, well, I have the room to store it if you want to buy it. And so he ended up buying the car.
Moving on to your bikes.
Started out with the bicycles, and had my first little Benelli before I even had a driver's license, and that kind of fueled the motorcycle passion. And so I've pretty much had motorcycles my whole life. This is a friend of mine's Street Glide. We just got back from a trip here a couple weeks ago, and he hasn't picked the bike up yet, but the one in the background, the silver bike, is my previous Road Glide that I had for quite a number of years, and I actually sold it to my brother, so he owns the bike. I store it for him, and but that was a bike I had for, I don't know, 6 or 7 years prior to the one that I own now. Yeah, it's got a big motor and custom paint and exhaust and all your normal Harley doodads. So it was a really nice bike. I really liked it. I just did everything I wanted to do with it, and it was time to do another one. So in probably 2017, I bought a few-year-old black Road Glide, and then I basically redid and built that bike, and like I said, that's up in the other garage. But being a city kid, the only time we got to, kind of ride mini bikes and back in the day, snowmobile was if you were lucky enough to have a friend that their parents had a cabin or somewhere and, go up in the summertime and ride dirt bikes or mini bikes or snowmobiles in the winter. I moved to Prior Lake in 1983 and got into snowmobiles at that point. And that's another thing, I guess I've had snowmobiles for 35 some odd years and had quite a number of them over the years. Got involved with the local snowmobile club. I did snowmobile safety training in Scott County for 20 years. Was part of the trail system out here in Scott County. Had 7 miles worth of trail that we cleared and brushed on an annual basis and put signs in and took signs out. Most people don't realize, but the trail systems in Minnesota, I think we have the second most miles of trail in the country, and we have about, I'm going to say 21,000 miles of snowmobile trail in the state of Minnesota. And probably 98% of them are all taken care of and maintained and groomed by snowmobile clubs. The DNR basically administers the program, but it is all volunteer local clubs that maintain and establish and keep those 21,000 miles of trail in the state of Minnesota. So that's a hats off to everybody involved in that hobby. So I don't do the training anymore, and I've given up my trail. I still belong to the local club and try to do a club trip or two every year. We try to go a couple different places and picnic in the summer. And we have a landowner picnic that we invite all our landowners that give us the permission to cross their land every July. And we cook 900 pounds of chicken and serve between 400 and 500 people every July. And that's a thank you to all of our landowners in Scott County.
Well, with all those vehicles, Chris, it looks like you need something to haul them in, and this looks like the perfect vehicle.
Yes, it is. This is the second trailer that we've owned. We started about 6 or 7 years ago, and basically we bought a camper to do horse shows. My wife and daughter show horses, and it was just a lot more practical to be able to stay right at the show and camp there. Otherwise, it was just, staying in a hotel and a lot of running back and forth. And so as long as we were going to have a camper, I thought, well, let's get a toy hauler in the back, and I can haul ATVs, or I can do some bike trips, haul my Harley in the back. So that's how we ended up being in camping.
Chris, looks like we're getting into the race car corner of the garage here.
Yeah, the first one you see here up on the blocks is a friend of both Lon and I's, Kirk Bendix, another instructor that helps us out from time to time. He has a Renard. I think it's, I'm not sure of the actual model. It's got a little bit bigger motor than the original Formula Fords. Maybe it's a Formula 2000. And he's campaigned and raced this car and had to freshen the motor up a few years ago, and so he brought the car to the shop, and he's been slowly kind of putting it back together. And I've been kind of watching the progress because about 10 years ago I bought a Renard Formula Ford, which is right behind, and that car came to me in pieces. It was taken apart, and I started on it fairly quickly. The guy had said that the motor was still in good shape and fairly fresh, but it had been taken apart and it was sitting for a few years, and I found the motor was stuck. So that kind of, I was able to free up the motor, but I thought, I don't want to put the whole car together and run it 2 or 3 times and find out that it's smoking or the motor lets loose, that I probably should just go through the whole car. So that put a wrench in the works for, a handful or so of years. And now about 2 years ago, I started to get back at it. I had the motor rebuilt and freshened up, had the transaxle gone through. I'm upgrading it to a hydraulic clutch. So we need to do a little machining and fabricating to make that work. That's kind of where I'm at. And then it can go back into the chassis. And then hopefully with some help from my good friends, we can do the subsystems, cooling, brakes, fuel, safety items, and hopefully get this car track worthy at some point. I've wanted to drive this car on the track for quite a few years now, and I think this winter there'll be a concerted effort between me and some of the people that are anxious to see me get back in this car that have offered graciously to help me with it. So I think, yeah, hopefully by next summer we can put this car back on the track and can start having some fun with it.
Hey Chris, looks like yet another project.
That's why people kid me about not ever getting anything done. Um, the little tractor you see before you, I bought from a neighbor about 10 years ago. It's a 1959 wheel horse, and I just thought it was a cute little tractor. Neighbor had it. He had kept it for years. The motor didn't run. I thought it would be cool to have out around the horses and tow a little wagon and give kids rides in it. So I bought it from him, and it kind of languished for about 10 years. And last winter, I tore into it, and the motor wasn't savable, but we were able to find a newer snowblower 6 horsepower motor that fit in there like a glove. And so basically got it running. So it runs and drives now. It needs a few things, and I hope to this winter take the whole thing apart and paint it up and decal it and make it look like it was when it was new.
And Chris actually has turned into a little bit of an artist here, so he's got this super cool looking alligator he's getting ready to put out in his yard. Chris was the artist on that, did a great job of blending in all the greens and making it almost look like it's going to come out and get you. You'll notice too, a really nice feature of Chris's garage is this in-floor heating. Very nice in the wintertime. You can literally come out here and lay on your back and work on anything you want to and not worry about getting cold. Hot and cold water, of course. Always have to have a beverage container when you're in the shop working. I'll take a picture of this outside too, but there's a nice little sign here that Chris has got for his speed shop. Nice old visor. It's got some really cool pin stripping on it also that matches the back of his Ford. It looks like Chris has got a couple of green machines here too.
Well, we do a little grass cutting with the mower, but the tractor, we have some horses at our house, and when I'm not running around a track, I can be found at a lot slower pace on the tractor, maintaining the property and cutting grass and using it, loading around bales for the horses. So kind of a must-have if you've got some horses and some acreage to maintain. So.
Speaking of horses, Chris, let's go take a look at your 1 horsepower options that you have here at the Horsepower Farm.
And so they don't call horses hay burners for nothing, But this is a hobby. I mean, I do like the horses. I'm not as involved as my wife and daughter. They both show and have been doing it for over 10 years now, and we were able to purchase this property, and last fall we were able to get some fencing put in and a shelter, and we brought a couple of babies home. My daughter had a foal last April, and we brought him home last fall, and maybe if we're lucky, if I call them, they'll come. Hey, Rio. Come here. Hey, Freddie. When you rattle feed buckets, it seems to get their attention. Yeah, see, yeah. Isn't that amazing how that happens? Yeah. Hey, Freddie. Come here, Rio. Come here. What you doing? Huh? Yeah. I know. I see ya. The two little ones were born last year. Fred's a little bit older. I think he's about 5. Um, you don't typically, break them to ride until they're, around 2.5 years old. So we kind of set this up at home so that we could bring, the young horses home and let them run around and be horses for a couple years and have a little fun with them and watch them grow up.
A huge thank you to Chris and his family for having me out today to take a look at their horsepower farm. Thanks, Chris.